welcome to Have Guitar Will Travel, presented by Vintage Guitar Magazine, with your host, me, James Patrick Regan, otherwise known as Jimmy from the Deadlies. And today I'm speaking with Eric Schenkman, guitarist and founder of the Spin Doctors. In our conversation, Eric talks amps and guitars and growing up in Toronto. And he also tells us how Jimmy Dale, the orchestra leader from the Sonny and Cher show, played a role in his musical upbringing. Eric takes us through the start of the Spin Doctors after going to a small music college and playing with John Popper. He also describes the grittiness of New York City in the mid-'80s, where the Spin Doctors were formed. Eric tells us about the current tour with the Spin Doctors and Blues Traveler and the Gin Blossoms, and the gear he'll be using. Eric also tells us about his weekly club date he does in Toronto on Wednesdays at Grossman's Tavern as the Action Sound Band. Eric finally describes why he left the band he founded early on and what brought him back and the excesses of the early days of the band. To find out more about Eric and the Spin Doctors, you can go to their website, spindoctors.com, spindoctors.com. Please like, comment, share, and most of all, review this podcast. I'd really appreciate it. And please support Vintage Guitar Magazine and all the wonderful things they do for us guitar players, because you know what? They're still doing wonderful things for us guitar players. Here's my friend Eric. How are you, Eric?
Good, killer.
Welcome to my car.
I love it. I was in traffic for like the last hour, and I got back from the amp repairman, actually, who's great. I've got a great amp repairman out in Georgetown named Dave Robinson.
Dave Robinson.
He's killer. Knows the Fender amps like nobody's business. And anyways, I was stuck in traffic, and my partner she asked me to put the salmon in a marinade, and I just finished it and washed my hands. So
right on. Very cool. And so you're still playing through the Basemans?
I do. I use them. I haven't been using them a lot recently. I kind of changed my shit up for different things. I'll go through something for a while, and then I'll change some piece of something, and it'll lead me to something else. I have a nice sort of cross section of amplifiers that I've been sort of. I realized the other day, I guess I kind of collect them.
Yeah.
You know.
Nothing wrong with that.
Nah. So with the Doctors, I'm using Voxes, old Voxes.
Okay.
And actually, interestingly, I just we had our gear got stolen out of the. Yeah, it's okay. A bunch of it got ripped off, and of course they took my stuff. Most of the stuff they took was my stuff. They must have been looking for guitar stuff. But I lost a Bassman, and I lost a Marshall head, and an AC30 head that I'd been using, and so we were replacing them, and I ended up getting one of the AC30s from Steve Thurston of the Tom Petty band that used to be on the road with Tom. Wow. And so I've got I've got a 63 combo and the 66 head and the original speaker cabinets. What a great combo. Nice combo. So that's what I use those guys. When I'm at home, I usually use Fenders. I've got a real fond soft spot for Tremoluxes.
Sure.
And yeah. So I bought a Tremolux in 78 at the pawn shop when I was like, whatever that was, 13 years old.
Okay.
And 14, I guess. And then just recently I acquired a JTM 45 Park head. And so I'm sort of switching over to that on my club date. So I'm a lucky guy. It's a 66.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, I like that,
Are you based in New York City for the most part?
No, I'm in Toronto now.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. My family's from New York, but my mom ended up in Toronto, and there's two kinds of people that take care of their parents and people that don't. I happen to be the former. So my mom passed years ago, but I was taking care of her from about 2000 until 3 years ago.
Sure.
Yeah. So I grew up here, and I ended up staying here. I'm too fucking lazy.
No, there's nothing lazy about that. That's
yeah.
So growing up there, were you playing in bands in high school and stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been doing bands forever. I mean, my first band was in 5th grade, I guess.
Wow.
I was drawing pictures of piggyback amps when my friends were drawing pictures of Army men. So in high school, we had like a half original, half cover band that was pretty popular in our high school, and we used to do all this stuff, the 60s stuff. But I was more into new wave until my friends started telling me that I was playing the blues good, and then I started going, well, okay, I want to be in that band, so I guess I'll do what they're saying I do. So I started learning of bit osmotic like that.
Yeah, of course. What kind of guitar were you playing back then in the early days?
I had my first guitar my first electric was a Kent.
Okay.
Just to give you an idea, since I'm at my house, I mean, my first guitar was our neighbor's Yamaha.
Oh, right on.
So I've been playing all my life. Really.
Yeah.
I should be much better than I am. So do you remember the Sonny and Cher show?
Of course.
So when I was in fourth grade, Jimmy Dale, who conducted the Sonny and Cher Orchestra, moved to Toronto.
Okay.
My father was the first cellist in Toronto, and that's how we ended up here.
Okay.
We were in St. Louis, and we got imported.
Oh, wow.
So as a result, yeah. So, and then my mom's from New York City, and so is my dad. So I went back, and then she got sick, and I came back here.
Sure.
So I'm sort of can-American, as it were. Interesting thing to be these days.
Yeah.
And so Jimmy Dale moved to Toronto, and he had two kids. One of them was my age. He was a cool dude, and he when they got to the school, it was at the end of the year they came. And I guess to try to get his kids, acclimated, right? He did like an assembly at this junior school I went to for whatever reason.
Okay.
Back in the days of like Godspell and Jesus Christ Superstar,
Yeah.
And I was like, I went to this thing, and he was talking about, because he was the conductor of the Sonny and Cher Orchestra, and he was talking about that, and he brought a Kent electric and a Kent electric bass.
Oh, wow.
And he demoed them. And I was that kid that was, after the assembly, was standing at the stage. I've done blues seminars for junior school. And when you see that kid, you're like, you're in trouble, man, because you ain't going to let this go, are you? And I was that kid. I was just standing there. I ended up begging my mother for $40, and he sold me that guitar.
Wow.
That was my first electric. And then I put a band together right after that. It was sort of more, my focus was wanting to play with other people, I think, than it was like trying to figure out, a bunch of guitar things like that. I went from there to Ventura. I still miss the Kent. I demoed it in the backyard a la Pete Townsend on the driveway.
Yeah.
And there was a Ventura, sort of faux 335. And then at a certain point, my mom got me a brown SG. Uh-huh. And then I traded that for an upside down Firebird. And then,
when you say upside down, what do you mean by that?
Well, not the cool ones, but the other one, but the big part here.
Aren't they both cool?
Well, not then. Then it was the other one at that time.
Yeah.
I mean, I wanted the one like with the banjo pegs. And
sure. Did it have the slider? Did yours have the slider switches?
Yeah, I think it did actually. Yeah. And it had, I think it had a mini humbucker.
Yep.
In the neck, and it was a cool sounding guitar. And then I started. I took some lessons with this guy at the local music store who had a '57 Strat and a really wonderful collection of guitars when they weren't worth anything. I mean, he had like a flame top mid '50s Les Paul. He had a double neck '58.
Wow.
He had. I'm trying to think what else he had. He had a couple other cool things. He had an old Fender Tremolux. That's why I ended up getting one of those. And then he had the Strat, and I was just joining that band that I told you about. I was probably about 14. Uh-huh. And I just got really into his Stratocaster. My first summer job, I saved the money. I had $300 saved, and I really wanted to get a Stratocaster, and traded the Firebird for something. I got a little bit more money, and then my teacher told me how to recognize a real Strat. Like, you want the pickups a little off color to the pick guard, and
sure.
Clouson tuners, and he just gave me a little checklist. At the time, there was this paper here called the Buy and Sell. I looked up in there, and I found there was a 65 Stratocaster. I went and saw it, fell in love, and just begged my mother for the extra. I think it was $200.
Yeah.
At that, I had to wait like the day after. So I learned the lesson of it. If it's meant for you, it'll still be there.
Yeah.
And I've ended up buying it. I still have it.
Right on.
Yeah, it was the guitar. It was the original Spin Doctors guitar.
Okay.
Those guys ended up telling me I had to get rid of it because I wouldn't let it out of my sight. And so I retired it, and John Sir built me a Stratocaster that I used sort of like at the other end of that guitar. And from there, I could keep going and graduate to the next thing. I tend to do that. I'll like play one until I sort of have it under my hands. And then if I see something else, I might go to that. Yeah. But I'll definitely I still can't play a Telecaster to save my life. Really? It's like, yeah, I mean, I probably can, but I don't feel like I can. I just never really quite got the telly thing, But you can play a V, okay?
Yeah,
you can play it depends on what, Anyways, yeah, that's my guitar lineage.
Yeah. What about amps?
Well, the first one was plugging into the Dynaco stereo that my dad built. Okay. With one of those RCA in the back. I did that. Yeah. And then my mom. Yeah, it's funny. My mom told me she never wanted me to be a musician, but she started me with all this shit. So she got me a purple Belltone, little one. Okay. I probably had an 8 or a 6 inch speaker that had tremolo, little tremolo switch. And from that, I ended up, I bought this Tremolux from the pawn shop, and I got the Tremolux, a Bandmaster cabinet with the tone cone and or whatever that's called with 112 that was busted, but they sold it to me anyways. And the original 210 cabinet for the Tremolux. I think it was $100 for all of that.
Wow.
And the Tremolux just one of those ones. It was, for whatever reason, it was voiced incredibly well. I still have it. It sounds wonderful. I used it on this most recent record in combination with my dear friend, departed friend Tim Thorney's 62 Bassman. It's got a green eye.
Wow.
And a little National. Yeah.
Wow. Right.
From the Trems, from that it went to probably into the Spin Doctors days, more or less, and that was started with. I think it started with a super reverb. We had a super reverb for a long time that the baffle fell out of it. You had to hold it in. It said like Galatian gospel singers carved in the silver face. It was probably like mid 70s. Went from there to then the bass player got real loud, and I ended up, I tried a boogie, and I used that boogie up through the beginning of the Kryptonite part of the band. I had a simulclasp with the one row of knobs, the convertible 60 to 100. I loved it, but the guy that kept fixing it didn't like it too much. Yeah. He used to open it up and go, spaghetti. That boogie simulclass on a high watt cabinet with Fanes circa 1983 or so. Yeah. And used that for a while. Gave myself tinnitus with that, actually.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Like, seriously?
Oh, yeah. I remember that night. It was DNA Club in San Francisco.
That's where I am. I know that club very well.
Yeah, I stuck that cabinet up on a 4x12 Marshall, and it was right behind my head.
Oh.
And I just, ever since then, I've had tinnitus. So, yeah. So that's the way it is. And it doesn't really bother me like it bothers some people, I guess. Yeah. And then from there, we were making Kryptonite, and I really didn't like the gain stages. I just didn't dig. It just, the saturation thing, I just never really got into that. I never made it that far. And the whole DX era of sounds, I never liked that either. I just always shied away from that shit. Yeah. Process. Tried it, and then after that was my first 100 watt Marshall, because Bob Mason had a 100 watt Marshall at RPM Studios, and I used that to do. I think the first time I used it was the Little Miss Can't Be Wrong solos. Okay. Because of course when you're in a trio and you get to you're cutting your first time you're really in the studio, we've been playing those songs for a couple of years. I was just dying to find the second guitar part, and it was cool. It was happening. So yeah, then I bought one, and then there was a long period of Marshall after that. And the beginning of the story I already told you. Then Marshall's, now it's to boxes. So yeah.
And any particular, are they vintage boxes or are they?
Yes.
Are they, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, the one's built the same year as me.
Oh, wow.
Same 63 December. The combo is a 66. I have a 68 AC50 head as well. And so I like the 60s amps.
Yeah.
I'm a 60. I like the yellow Tolex Fenders and
sure. Yeah.
That's my thing. Yeah.
We call it blonde though, not yellow.
Yeah, the blonde. And I'm not a reverb. I'm like, I've always been no reverb.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I agree.
Oh, cool.
And how did you end up in the Spin Doctors? So you're in Toronto. Did you move to the city, or how did you get there?
Well, like I said, my family was from, my grandmother grew up in the Bronx, and my mom grew up in the Village. And by the time I got to being about 19 or 20, I moved to New York. I moved back. I moved to New York to go to school. That's a long story. I mean, I could abridge it by just saying I dropped out many, many times and ended up finishing in the States, where at this weird school in Vermont that I went to for 1 year that my dad dropped out of. That's how I am. I'm like, well, he dropped out of that one. I'm going to finish there. So, and then I did the SATs and whatnot, or before or after that, and I got accepted to Tulane and the New School for Social Research. In other words, New Orleans and New York City. And I decided I'd go to New York. Went to New York with no guitar. I'm never going to do that. I'm done. No fucking guitar. And I get to New York about halfway through the first 2 months. This kid named Tommy Dog, who was in my class, realized that I played the guitar. He had a punk band, and before I knew it, I was in his band. Then the next year, a guy named Arnie Lawrence started the jazz and contemporary music program at Parsons School of Design. It was a very small, hadn't started yet school, which is my environment. I'm good like in those situations. I met the dude in an elevator going up with the prospectus. I looked at the back of it in the elevator. I said, I've got records by everybody on your list. And he says, oh, I'm Arnie. I'm starting school here, in a week. He says, do you play? I said, I play the guitar. He goes, why don't you come back and audition? So I came back and with my guitar, and went up to the dean's floor instead of the photography floor where I was trying to register. And I played a blues, and I think I played Corcovado by Joe Beam, best I could. And Arnie looked at me and he said, we could do something with you. And that led me into being part of the coolest fucking music school you could ever go to. Nobody graduated from it. I think I might have. After I quit the Spin Doctors, I might have gone back. It's the greatest faculty. I could go on and on. I won't. But that's where the Spin Doctors started. I started the Spin Doctors. So that's how I started with the band. As I said, I always like starting bands. So I started the band. I had met Chris. John Popper introduced us. And I was working with John in a band through that same school. We were going to blues jams and whatnot. And at a certain point, John said he was going to bring Blues Traveler into New York from Princeton. He had already brought Chris into a rehearsal of ours. And I had met. And John says, well, I want to keep this band together, but I'm going to bring my other band in. And I said, well, I don't want to be in your other band. I don't want to be in your second band, bro. So I went to Chris. I just sort of met him, and I said, let's do it. He says, fine. And then I heard Aaron Comas playing drums from behind a door. I had never met him. I think he was playing I Shot the Sheriff, but I didn't know it at the time. Knocked at the door. Here comes this guy to the door. I said, hey, man, I had a gig already. For all you out there to want to start a band, that's what you want to do. Don't endless rehearse, get a gig. Then you got to start. You got to do it. So I said, well, I got this gig. You want to be in a working band? He still jokes me about that line. And here's this guy. He's planning to play with everybody. I says, well, you got to have some, you got to have some allegiance to us. And of course, he said, yeah, but it wasn't until we really got together that our chemistry, the three of our chemistry, is very good. And we were like, okay, we started, everybody brought their music together. We finished everybody's music together. And then we started writing together as well, and did our first gig. That's another long story, but we did that. And we went through about 4 bass players, and Aaron was already working with Mark White. And we were really trying to find the fourth man. And I went down one night. They played in this band called Spade, a funk band. And I went down there, and I heard Mark play 4 notes in one split second, because he plays a lot of notes in a split second. And just he hits the E string a certain way. It's just it's like, dude's cool. And that was it. That was the combo. And we got together, played about one note, and we were just like, oh, God damn,
So What was New York like I mean, that's the early 80s. What was New York like? How gritty was it in the early 80s?
It was great. It was great. And it was great in the 80s. It was would have been more like mid to late 80s. It was everything, man. It was, the Lone Star was still there. All the old clubs were still there. The jazz scene was still, all the jazz clubs were still there.
Yeah.
Bleecker Street had a tourist scene that you could go and play at if you could get in there. And the bars on the east side, the punk bars were all still really gritty and really, really seedy. And then there was still the dance clubs were still on the west side. So it was really it was every bit New York. It was just, St. Mark's was open all night. I mean, the Kiev and the Veselka, you could go and get breakfast until, all night long. I mean, the bar on Spring Street that I used to walk by was open in the morning and at night. And, it was just a great, great place. Just oozed that smell of airways and music just everywhere. Everything sounded like music. You'd hear the song. Either sounded like a whale, a seal, or like Jimi Hendrix, you know what I mean? Or
sure.
or like, it was ripe.
Yeah.
And
how'd you move gear around back then?
Well, cabs, man. We'd sit on the corner. One of us would flag a cab and then bring it around the corner.
Yeah.
And then you've already got the cab. You just start loading that shit in there,
Wow.
You get the trooper in there. We used to, I had an apartment that it was like a typical college 6th generation apartment, Elizabeth and Spring, just down the street from where Def Jam started, actually. And my landlord, Aaron, ended up moving in there. I had a few roommates first before that. I was the person's roommate who had the place first, of course. And then eventually Aaron moved in. So then and then Chris started coming over a lot, and John was a frequent visitor, Popper. We did a lot of writing there. We have a song called Freeway of the Plains, which is actually kind of a testimonial to sitting on the roof and watching the planes up just go over our head. We did a lot of stuff there. That era of New York was incredible. So we had this great, and it was just right by CBGB's.
Uh-huh.
It was old New York, man. Yeah. So we'd load up the stuff and go to the gig. After the gig, and then also once we started getting, sort of popular on Bleecker Street and whatnot, this kid named Jason started coming around. He was at NYU, and it became pretty clear that he was going to become our manager, our road manager. So Jay, he looked like Johnny Depp back then. He became our manager. And one of the things that was super fantastic about Jason that made him instantly appealing, aside from his lovely personality, was he had a gold Duster.
Oh, wow.
And the back seat comes out of that, so we could get everything in there. And the three of us would sit across the bench and drive pretty much together. Yeah. Back in those days in New York, the saying was "no cop, no stop." And there was no surveillance. There was none of that. Yeah. So that became our thing. We went from that to an Econoline that we bought after we spent money.
Yeah.
We were doing good in New York. We were paying our rent.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Yeah. Were you just strictly playing in New York, or were you playing?
Yeah, and that's another thing about New York back then was that we were doing you'd open the Voice, you'd just see Spin Doctors. Back then, the Village Voice came out on Thursday nights, and you could pretty much plan your week or your 2 weeks or however regularly it came out. You'd go open it up and just circle all the. There was pages of where the bands were. There was lots of clubs. It's worth mentioning that at that time, the cabaret law had come down. The cabaret law, for those that don't know, was an old prohibition law that forbid. It was really a real estate play, but anyways, it forbid more than 3 people on a stage, I think, at the same time. But it was done before electric music, so it affected horns a little bit more. Uh-huh. But it came down. Paul Cheveney, the lawyer, was representing the union, and they went up against the powers that be, and that law came down, and suddenly a lot more clubs became viable. We were, and that was about 86.
Uh-huh.
So there was this other event that happened that opened up even more venues. So yes, to the answer to your question, we could work in Manhattan and slightly surrounding areas 5 nights a week.
Wow.
And we did. Yeah. When we bought the Econoline, we decided, because we became very popular in the city, and we decided to try to take it wider. We bought an Econoline with the big locks and the cage. We put the cage on it.
Of course.
Started to going to places like Ithaca and Ithaca was the first place that we really went. But we'd go around about that's where there's Philly, maybe it's more. We just started to go like that, you know? Yeah.
How'd you go about getting a record deal in that era? Like,
we didn't want to have nothing to do with a record deal. we were making our rent, man. You know, at least for me, I was like, you know, at the time, the Elizabeth Street phone number was on our business card. So anybody that was fielding us was calling. I was picking up the phone pretty much, and I really didn't care about a record deal at all. I was so happy that, you know, we were making our rent. And when you're in your early 20s and you're making your rent, you don't see past that. Sure. I mean, this is great. In New York, the clubs were open until 4 at that time. You play 3 sets. Yeah. You know, it was like the band was like, you know, well tuned, man. You know, we strong and we could move and did these different clubs and play all night. Yeah. So eventually, what happened? There's a club called the Continental Divide, and some girl had really dug us down there, part of that scene, and she went back to the guy who babysat. She babysat his kids, a fellow named David Sonnenberg, and turned out to be our next manager, who then came down. He actually called my phone, and he said, you know, he thought, you know, we get a record deal. And I was like, we don't need nothing like that. It wasn't that polite. And I hung up on him, called me back. He said, give me 30 days. Yeah. And in 30 days, he started a bidding war, and we ended up on CBS. Yeah. So, I mean, we used to go out of town when the CMJ, when the big festival would be, when all the bands would come in to try to get signed. Sure. We would leave. Yeah. We were just not that, you know, we weren't that band. We're rebels, even though we don't look like old punks or anything. We were of that ilk. Yeah. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
Going back, sorry. It was Jimmy Daly, you said? That was that.
Yeah, Jimmy Dale was the conductor of Sonny and Cher Orchestra. That's correct.
And were there other guitarists that you were listening to? Or like, were you watching TV and seeing guitarists on TV, or how?
Yeah, I get my stuff from that. I remember I had a tape recorder with a microphone, so I could record a little bit off the TV. You know, I remember seeing Joni on the Sonny and Cher show. I remember. You know, things like that. There was Midnight Express, or wasn't it called Midnight Express? Midnight Special. Sorry.
Midnight Special, and then Don Kirshner.
Yeah, you know, Bert Sherman's the Midnight Special, and the Don Kirshner rock concert. So I see all that stuff, and man, that was a good time for music. I mean, everybody could play, so that, and you know, and then there was records, right? So my dad was a cellist. He liked all contemporary music that had anything to do with orchestration. So I heard a lot of Beatles. I heard a lot of Frank Zappa. I heard a lot of anything like that. And my tastes fell sort of Canada. So I became really into things like, you know, Bachman Turner Overdrive and, you know, I'm trying to think like Jay Giles, Full House, you know,
sure.
You know, First I Look at Verse and like, you know, that kind of stuff. That was my thing when I was in sort of 5th or 6th grade. That was really what. And then the radio, man, because the hit radio was, all you got to do is just look at the top of the listings. It's just all the great music's on there.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, you look at that, pick it up, and, you know, there was no YouTube. You just had to sort of try to copy what you heard.
And when you're playing the clubs in New York City for 3 or 4 sets, are you guys playing covers? Or are you playing all originals? Or?
Well, it would depend, really. When we hit Bleecker Street, we got in there because we had an interesting variety of original music. We had blues. Chris like he's a blues head too, as am I, and so we had a bunch of like original blues songs, and we had then we had the originals that were coming, and there was other stuff that I liked too from some of the bands that I was just coming from in New York. I played in a band called Luvette Jackson, the Body Heat band, between John and the Spin Doctors, and I was kind of like the only white guy in the band, and the repertoire was all like, you know, Ike and Tina and like, you know, the Commodores and this stuff that I really wasn't that familiar with growing up in, you know, like downtown Toronto. So that was an influence too. So we'd pick up some of those songs, James Brown's Think, stuff like that. And when we got into the idea of, that was cool for the clubs that were original clubs, like the Nightingale Bar, which was a mainstay for us. This is all pre-Wetlands. But when we got to Bleecker Street, it became pretty clear that like there was a couple of clubs that were blues clubs. So we'd go in and we'd play a little bit of blues covers and our blues. And as soon as we hooked the people and they were drinking and dancing a little bit, we'd start playing our shit too, our other shit. And because the night was going well, they didn't fire us. So that was our sort of our in. And we'd go plaster Washington Square Park with passes. And, you know, of course, when you're young, you're you're just giving passes out to all the cute girls, and it's
exactly.
Your 20s. It's anybody out there that remembers. I barely do, but
with this tour coming up right now, are you going to be using the Voxes? You're using the Voxes?
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what about guitars?
SGs. I've been using SGs with the Doctors since about 2005 live. I didn't really record with them a lot, but it just sort of like happened. I went to Gibson was being nice to me at the beginning of the century, and at some point I went in there and I just sort of grabbed two guitars because they used to give them to me, and it just sort of happened that the two nicest guitars in the room was an SG Standard and a Les Paul. I broke the Les Paul by mistake, and it was left with the SG. It's a nice one, and so I just sort of stuck with that. And I've changed the pickups out 100 times. I'm not really fond of, I wasn't really fond of what came in per se. Yeah. I have a wonderful friend named Thomas Nielsen who has various companies. They've been called random things over time. He had Cream Tea pickups for a while, but I think it's just Thomas Nielsen pickups now. Okay. He's made stuff for Billy Gibbons, and he's went pickups for all sorts of people. Yeah. And so most of my pickups, if they're not old ones, they come from Thomas. Yeah. And and I got a couple SGs. I think there's 3 right now. And that's what I've been using on the road. That's what I use, them and the boxes.
Yeah. And everything's standard tuning, nothing special?
Yep. Yeah. Nothing special. No.
What about pedals or pedal boards or?
I'm not a big pedal board guy. If I had my way, I just have one. When I play my club date in town here, which I do every week for like the last 7.5 years, I use mostly, now I started with a V, but I use a 330, a cool 330 that I found about 5 years ago. And I outfitted it with a pair of humbuckers. I think they're supposed to be like 59s. It was originally a single coil guitar. It's a funny, weird. Somebody cut it for 3 humbuckers. Wow. Yeah, but I got it for a song because it's just a husk, but it's a 59.
Yeah.
And the neck is gorgeous. Yeah. It's just got this great carve, and you get up above A on that neck. But when anybody ever asks me about isn't that a problem when you get up there? I always say, well, you get up that high, you just go down again. I mean, it's just the way it is. And so that guitar it has become, that's sort of that club guitar. And
so what day of the week is it that you play once a week up there?
I play Wednesdays. Yeah, it's going to be hard this summer because I'm going to have to miss a whole lot of them because we're going out. But I've been doing Wednesdays for like 7.5 years, man, through the pandemic even.
What's the name of the club?
It's called Grossman's Tavern in Toronto. Toronto's home of the blues, and my group there is called the Action Sound Band.
All right, right on.
Yeah, the trio.
Yeah, and so the tour that you're going to do was basically with people that you grew up with. I mean,
Traveler and
yeah,
and we're all friends. We've toured with the Gin Blossoms extensively. We've toured with the Traveler even more. I can say, certainly that I'm friends with every single person in both of those bands. I've known them for a long time. We all know each other. Yeah. So it's just going to be, we're all looking forward to it. Yeah. It's going to be great to be with Popper for the summer. I love playing with John. I'll get a chance to play with him some. And so, it's going to be a great tour. I just think it's going to be a fantastic tour.
Yeah. Are you guys, is it all fly dates or are you?
No, we're busing.
You're in a bus?
Yeah. Yeah, we're doing I think John works 4 in a row. That's the most he'll do. And they're headlining it. So we'll do 4, and then there'll be a break, and then 4, and then we'll be a break. And in the spaces, I'll either come back home, or some of the spaces we've booked some dates with the Gins and some dates just our own, because we do our own gigs anyway.
Yeah, of course. I should ask, why'd you quit your own band?
It's a good question, a fair question. I just, you get older and you have perspective. At the time, I might have given different reasons. I might have been more blamey. But I think the blame falls on, probably me as well as Chris. It didn't have anything to do with Aaron. He's the most balanced guy I know. I just couldn't handle where it was going. Management was getting too much of a decision-making role. I didn't really feel like the second record was representing the songs that it should have off the top. I wanted to go back to smaller venues. Of course, management booking always wants to go to bigger venues.
Yeah, of course.
I missed the old crowd, and I wasn't getting any support, like from that point of view. And I've always been a bit of a hothead, not nearly so much as I used to be now, but fuck this shit, you know. I was out of here. I left for 7 years, and they went through a couple of other manifestations, and 7 years later, pretty much to the day, we reunited to celebrate the closing of the wetlands. And it was really the wetlands' fault that they reached out, and nobody said no. And we had a really similar rehearsal that we had, as I've described to you before, which I would say is also the same kind of meeting that we had with Jack Daly years later, which is that we got in a room together, played 5 notes, and was just like, what the fuck were we thinking? Yeah, you know, hug. And I've been in the band now for just about 25 years since then.
Wow.
I was in for like, what it was like 86 or 7 till 94. So something like 7 or 8 years. I was out for 7 years, and I'm back for 25.
In the MTV era, was there just like cocaine everywhere and just deviance everywhere?
I think there was a lot of that around. It always seemed to me to be like, you know, our band never was into blow, but there was always jokes about, like, I had plenty of friends in other bands that I won't really get into. I don't like to. Yeah, of course. You know, I don't want to cast any, but there was plenty of cocaine around. I've always been a weed guy myself. I don't drink. I smoked tons of weed back then. You know, I probably looked like I was strung out on something, but I never really stoned on weed. Chris was stoned Chris used to smoke a lot of weed too. Aaron smoked a bit of weed. Nobody really drank that much in our band. But, you know, people liked to party back then. The MTV era really was a weird time for us because we got really big, really fast. And like I said to you earlier, like the crowd became a bit more glazed because now you're playing for younger people only on TV. And so it was a bit weird for us because our band was sort of honed on this New York City, like really close to the audience, like energy going back and forth things. It was a difficult transition, and that sort of helped to sort of cause the kind of entropy that led to, like, you know, division. So that little break that we had, it wasn't the greatest thing for our touring career necessarily. We've had to build it back up over the years. Has turned out to be kind of a good thing in the long run. You know, it was just kind of a weird time. It wasn't not fun. It was great, but in terms of the music, it was a wee bit challenging in that way. You know, TV and all. Yeah. But I'm not going to say it wasn't fun. It was definitely fun.
And was it disheartening to see people spending so much money on, like, you know, like your record label spending so much money on videos for you and stuff like that? I mean, those were big ticket items.
Yeah. I mean, you know, there's this thing that happens in the record industry, but back then, anyways, I don't know if it still does. It's so different now, where, you know, you get an advance. Our advance wasn't that big. It was, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it wasn't huge. It was, you know, a couple 100,000, maybe more. And you feel like they're giving you the money. And this is the old adage. Of course, they're not. They're just lending it to you. And most bands sink after that. And then you go under. You either pay them back or you lose your catalog. We were very lucky in that we had, like, sort of an 11th inning hit. And then that allowed Two Princes to, like, you know, it opened the door. Little Miss opened the door, and then Two Princes just went right down the middle. It was very lucky. We were able to recoup. We were able to renegotiate. So, you know, that was just extremely lucky, you know, for us. It doesn't always happen that way. In fact, it usually didn't. But, you know, MTV was really, really great for us. It was where our videos got played. And the first couple where they were expensive were good. Like Little Miss was a great video. I really like it. I got hit in the back with a paint can, but other than that, it was a tremendous experience. And then Two Princes, I still think Rich Murray made that video, and he made our video just now for Boombox that we just made. And yeah, which is cool. Like, you know, you see these people again, and we've got this really kind of great resurgence going within ourselves right now. We feel like it feels a lot like the old days. It feels a lot like Kryptonite, this little phase we're in. Right on. Because we didn't try too hard with any of this stuff, you know. The record was demo tape, and, you know, and everybody's gotten so much better as players as well. So, it's, you know, all of those things are great. What I would say about videos is the second record, which was sort of the beginning of the end of the first phase of the band, as we've sort of touched on, was we made a video for the single, the first single, Cleopatra's Cat, which I was not into as the first single. I just didn't think it was a good single. It was slow. It's a great song. I love it, but just didn't seem like a great, I would have picked Big Fat Funky Booty personally, or something like that. And, or You Let Your Heart Go Out. And we rented the Museum of Modern Art, which cost a whole lot of money. It was fun. And then we spent all this money on some big video producer. And all I'll say this about that. We did, the guy that mixed and co-produced Kryptonite and Turn It Upside Down, our second studio record, so a really wonderful engineer named Peter Denberg. And I was standing on the Staten Island ferry because the band was doing something on the ferry, so filming for something. I can't remember what it was exactly. But we're standing at the railing of the Staten Island ferry and we're talking about the video, and I was probably shit canning how much money we spent on it, alluding to what you were just asking me. Yeah. And Peter looks at me and he goes, you could have just taken all that money and put it in a pail, dumped it right in the river. And, so there was that, right? Like, yeah, it was a bit excessive. People got overpaid and it wasn't really in the best interest of the band. So, but at the beginning, the first couple, were well worth it for us.
Sure.
Yeah.
And how are you doing now financially? Like, are you clearly you probably have to tour, but are you okay? Like, are you set? Yeah. I live in my own house. I own my own guitar. Yeah. I own my guitar. I can. I play with the band that I started with Chris 35 years ago. Yeah. That to me is, with the combination of taking care of my mom when she needed it, that's I couldn't be more successful, man. Yeah. Right on.
Yeah.
Well, it's great speaking with you, Eric. I appreciate you giving me this time.
I appreciate talking to you.
Yeah. You guys are going to be in, I'm in Northern California, and you're going to be in Saratoga in August, and hopefully I get to meet you in person.
Well, I hope that you just come find me. Just come find me. Yeah, I'd love to meet you in person.
Yeah, likewise. I thank you for your time. Bye-bye.
Right on, brother.
Yeah, see ya. Thanks for listening to Have Guitar Will Travel. You can catch up on all the things I'm doing at thedeadlies.com, and I'm on all the social media platforms as well. And please support Vintage Guitar and all the wonderful things they do, because they do many, many wonderful things for us guitar players. Thanks. Please subscribe. Please tell a friend, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye, guys.